Welcome and thank you for coming to hear about my around the world sabbatical trip. But let's open with prayer. The Lord be with you. O God, our refuge and strength, our help in times of trouble. Have mercy on the lands damaged by fires, especially here in San Luis Obispo. Protect those who have had to evacuate and strengthen those who rebuild hope so that entire communities may face the future without fear. Amen. Again, thank you for being here. It's a little bit intimidating because I wasn't 100% sure what people wanted when they said, I want to hear about your trip around the world. So I tried very hard to make this presentation about something that's just showing you 3,500 vacation photos. So it's about 25% content rich and 75% vacation photos. So it was a hard thing to do, but you're the ones who asked. So here we go. I have to do two computers at one time.
Can we turn the lights on?
We can. They're right above that black van. And I did do a test run yesterday, and it should be just under an hour. If we save questions for the end, that would be great. So the church is very generous, and it gives its clergy a sabbatical every 4 to 5 years. And so to do this, one dreams big, plans meticulously, goes to the Star Alliance Round the World booking website, unless you're on One World, but I'm on Star Alliance. I wouldn't fly American if you paid me. Well, I would. And packs strategically. I was going to be a visual aid of my suitcase, but I'll describe it to you after the presentation. It was pretty interesting. So where did I start? I started with an interest in Christianity and food. And since I've been ordained, I've shared in sermons and workshops and presentations and actually weekend retreats how I believe that the preparing and sharing of food can be a spiritual activity. And when done in a Christian context, I believe Jesus is with us. And so I took this as an opportunity to go to the next level. And that's how this trip kind of was born. And I don't talk too much about the project that I did along the way, because if I don't finish, I only disappoint myself, not other people. But I'm getting closer and closer to finishing. It involves editing 5 videos, and I only learned how to edit video because of the pandemic. So I'm very slow on that. So that's how this trip came to be. Well, also, I had a friend who's part of this trip. He lives in Australia. He lived in San Jose when I lived in San Jose. And he was an executive vice president for a multinational company and was from Australia. So quite often booked round the world trips because they're cheaper than doing individual segments. So where did I go? Those are the 8 cities I went to. And 4 were chosen because of my project. London made the Round the World website work properly. Bangkok was because I was in the region. And Sydney and Auckland were supposed to be my 50th birthday trip. And that would have been in 2020. So that didn't happen. So what do I mean by welcome when I'm doing this presentation? Welcome comes in very, very many forms, and it's very subjective. For example, many would say that the Thursday Farmers Market is a form of welcome. And here you can see back in May, the Gala Pride and Diversity Center was tabling in advance of Pride. Slow PD was tabling and giving out fun rubber donuts, and I made sure I got one of those. But that same weekend, the National Bike to Work Day, Bread Bike was, the Bread Bike Craft Bakery. They were making pancakes for anyone who cycled there on their bike. And I think all of those are forms of welcome. And then others may see a priest, a nun, and a rabbi meeting in a cafe that's run by formerly incarcerated individuals as a form of welcome as well. And I would say all of that is, but you know that we can find somebody who finds fault in farmers market and or fault with giving away free pancakes and anything interfaith. So it's all subjective. I started in SLO very early on Saturday, May 27th, very early, with a long layover in San Francisco. We have not resumed all our flights in and out of SFO. We used to have 2 on United and one on American. So it's very annoying because we have these long layovers in LA and SFO now. But one of my goals was to file, always the optimist, one of my goals was to file my old emails while in airports. And I thought I would finish during a 5-hour layover in San Francisco. And the truth is, I had far more old emails to file than that, and I finished about 5 weeks later. So that was fun. Hey, Clark, how's your house?
It's okay.
Are you, because you're in the evacuation zone?
Yep, we're evacuated.
Okay, you evacuated to the refuge that is the church. Well,
No, evacuated to Amy's farm,
okay,
but we're fine.
okay,
It looks like things are under control.
good, good. Thank you for the update.
Yes.
So I arrived at Heathrow at 6:55 a.m. on Sunday morning. UK immigration is one of the most unwelcoming immigration. It's not like horrible. They're not mean to you or anything, but it's not welcoming. That's the sign you get is UK border. And I've always thought that was kind of interesting because San Francisco is very different when you're coming the other way. In fact, now that I've been around the world, I will say that if I was ranking just the visual welcome, Heathrow would be at the bottom. But I will say, since I was last there in 2019, the UK Border Patrol has added the US to the digital entry. And so I didn't actually have to be interrogated by a border agent. I just put my passport in and the kiosk opened up and let me in. And I went on my way. And that's the first time in any country that I've done that. And it was great. I'm sure you two did it when you went. It's brilliant, isn't it? But the last time I was there, the US was excluded. I think it was just Europe at the time, was it? And we've been added, so that was great.
I'll let you into a secret. We always use our UK passports to go through.
I was just gonna say, we don't have to do it.
Yeah. They have that in the US now too, and there was a couple other countries where I just got to put my passport in. It was great. Arriving at 7 a.m. is difficult because I couldn't check into my hotel.
Right.
And so I dropped my luggage and I had done some research on which Sunday service to go to in central London. I didn't want to go to Westminster Abbey or St. Paul's Cathedral. You're probably asking why, because I've been to them several times. I used to live in, for those of you who don't know, I used to live there. And I had landed on Old St. Pancras Church, which was probably about a 15-minute walk from my hotel. But about 36 hours before I flew, I remembered that Old St. Pancras does not support the ordination of women. So I didn't want to go there. So I started my search again. The three churches I wanted to go to had 11 o'clock services, and I didn't want to wander around aimlessly until 11 o'clock. So instead of remembering that a seminary friend of mine is about a 20-minute tube ride away, her church is, I didn't remember to do that, and I could have visited her. I went to St. John's Waterloo. And it was the Feast of Pentecost. Their service at 9 a.m. that morning was morning prayer. I would have gone to the 10:30 service. It would have been a Eucharist. But it was a lovely group of people. They had a multi-bazillion dollar refurb during the pandemic. And it's just absolutely gorgeous in there. And they were wonderful people. They were very welcoming without being overbearing. And so the welcome was so great that I accepted their invitation to coffee hour, which I don't normally do in churches that I'm visiting. And it was a very pleasant conversation and an interesting turn to the merits and detriments of the current Archbishop of Canterbury. But it was time to get some brunch and go on my merry way and see if I could check in early. St. John's Waterloo is on the roundabout across the roundabout from Waterloo Station. So very busy place. So the Waterloo Station is a major rail and tube station, like so major that there's 2 stations. And this statue has been installed since I was last in Britain. I visited in 19 and this was put up in 22. And I include this in a presentation on welcome because the whole Windrush movement was a government exercise in welcoming the Afro-Caribbeans in labor shortage. Correct me if I'm wrong. Those of you, there's 3 people from Britain here, a labor shortage. And it didn't exactly go as planned. And this probably doesn't go very far in making up for the fact that a lot of them ended up in poor ghettos, particularly in Manchester, which is where I did a placement when I was in seminary, in an Afro-Caribbean neighborhood, who told me everything about how they got there and the jobs that they were promised weren't there. So a lot of conversation near the end of my time there was being started about the Windrush generation and how do we address this situation. Does anybody from Britain want to expand on that at all? That you know about the Windrush generation?
What I've read in the press.
Okay. So I really appreciated that monument, a national monument.
There was an issue with their paperwork. I think they've not been given paperwork to confirm
That they were
the
supposed
right to be there.
Right, okay, yeah,
Which
Can you
isn't very
repeat
welcome.
what she said?
right, what?
Can you repeat what she said?
She thinks that they weren't given the right paperwork to finish the whole kind of, to seal the deal. And so they did, I mean, all of Longsight is people who came here and didn't have jobs, didn't get jobs.
But just to make it more fun, I think the government destroyed their records
Oh,
and then said, you haven't got the paperwork to prove that you should be here.
I didn't hear that part. Wow. Wow.
Destroyed or not?
Well,
Destroyed lot.
here's a tiny drop in recognizing that that generation.
You've got a statue.
So I went up to Manchester. The reason I didn't want to go to Britain is because if I go to Britain, I have to go all over the country. I have to go all over England because I went to seminary there, so my friends are dispersed across the country. And I had a small window to pop into Manchester Cathedral, where I was ordained deacon in 2004. Manchester Cathedral welcomes people by keeping its doors open during the day, and I was there very early before my train to Chester, where I was meeting more friends. And Manchester Cathedral has worship every day as required by the Church of England, and all worship is open to the public. And that is where I developed my interest in city center ministry. And St. Stephen's is the closest I've come to city center ministry, and I enjoy being geographically at the center of a city. And I just remember when I was on that placement in Longsight, I would go to the cathedral at 7:10 a.m. or whatever for morning prayer, followed by the Eucharist, and that's where I developed the thought of city center ministry. So off to the next country. I was there very briefly. I was there for 4 nights. And I saw everyone. So off to Athens. So I never made it to Athens when I lived in the UK because it was just a bit too expensive to go there. And my sabbatical project was the perfect excuse to visit Athens. And after email exchanges with a former parishioner from my parish in Manchester, who is Greek, the Church of England priest in Athens, the Bishop of Cyprus at the Gulf, who previously was a bishop in the Diocese of Manchester, the Romanian priest at St. Andrew's Greek Orthodox Church here in San Luis Obispo, hooked me up with Father Nectarius. And you'll learn more about that in the videos from my project about Koliva and Prospera, which is pictured here. Those will be the 4th and 5th videos. And it was definitely a fantastic welcome, not only to Greece, but to the inner sanctum of Greek Orthodox worship. I will tell you, in terms of the airport, don't remember, got in at midnight, didn't know if my car was going to be available. But other than that, Father Nectarius and his people took really good care of me. I had a backstage pass to, so let me back up a bit. So the welcome into Greek Orthodox worship involved a big service at a church in central Athens. The Orthodox are a lot less uptight about demeanor during worship, while we insist that you enter before worship, assume the prescribed position for that moment until the service ends, when we give you permission to leave. Orthodox worship is far more fluid. The welcome into their worship came with the permission to move freely around the sanctuary and the backstage areas of the church building. I was hesitant at first because you don't move around in church if you. And I hastily set up my filming equipment at the beginning of the service. About an hour into it, I moved much more freely in ways that we would find intrusive and disrespectful. And they were telling me to do this, like, they were saying, no, if you need to move your camera, just go out there and do it, and I was like, okay. But it was a real-time exercise in learning different cultural customs. So this was the welcome I got at ancient Corinth of 1st and 2nd Corinthians. I went out there on Sunday morning when I still had my car, and I went first thing in the morning, and I was like, there's gonna be a line of lots of Americans trying to get to see where Paul wrote his letters to and all this kind of stuff, and I gotta get there. There were 2 55-passenger tour buses, and I was like, I'm getting ahead of these people, and I got there 10 minutes before it opened, and that was the line. That was the line, and by the time I left an hour later, there were like 10 other people there, so it was not as popular as I thought it was going to be. Welcome to the Bible. This is kind of what ancient Corinth looks like right now. And then if you look behind, if you look behind, you see what's called Acrocorinth, which is Upper Corinth, and it's this big, huge hill. And I won't go through the whole drama of me deciding whether or not I was going to walk up there and then finding out an hour later that I could drive up there. But I did end up driving up there, and spectacular views from up there. Absolutely great. So if you're ever in ancient Corinth, do Acrocorinth as well, because you get some great views. So in my rush to beat the rush at Old Corinth, so some of you may know this already, but they're changing the USB to charge your phone. And it's called USB-C, and it's much thinner and flatter than what we're used to for USB, right? But your car still has the old one, even though your phone goes into the new one. Except if you get a BMW in Athens, it's USB-C. And I have an adapter because this one is USB-C, USB-C. I may be saying stuff that you don't care about. But instead of walking back to my hotel and getting the adapter, which would have taken me 5 minutes, I was like, oh, I'll be fine. Never say that when you're gonna go on a day trip with your phone. So I couldn't charge my phone in the car, but I did have the brick to plug it into the wall. So I went to modern Corinth in search of the right cable on a Sunday morning in a country that still observes Sunday, and found nothing, and my phone was just dying faster. But I will tell you, the beaches in Corinth are they're like absolutely postcard beautiful, absolutely beautiful. One bar staff member plugged in my phone for like a half an, well, he wouldn't let me do longer, but I was like, can't sit here and have him plug in my phone. So I kind of wandered that, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And then this was my destination on the way back to Athens, was to go to the Corinth Isthmus Canal. It used to be land all the way across, and the Greek government said, we're going to cut a canal through because that's going to improve shipping and we're going to make lots of money, which never materialized. And there's a whole palaver about getting my phone charged, which I eventually did. I took one photo of the canal and my phone died. So I wandered around, blah, 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 blah. Finally got an hour's worth of charge and took some more photos of the canal. It's stunning. And again, it's kind of like the Grand Canyon. The picture's not going to be enough. You just have to go.
And they don't use it?
They've been having a couple cruise ships go down it, but it's not the trade route that they thought it was going to be.
It's large enough for cruise ships then?
No, it's not very wide.
I didn't think it
Yeah,
looked
it's
that
like,
long.
it's those gigantic celebrity cruises aren't gonna be going down there,
No,
you know,
it's not.
or it's gonna be the Suez Canal again, like it. So this is very controversial, but there's controversy over the Parthenon and the part that is missing.
The elder marble.
Yes, in the top there that's missing is known as the Parthenon marbles. Unless you're in the British Museum, they're known as the Elgin marbles. And that's where they would normally go. And they're doing a huge reno of the Parthenon. I think they're trying to get it back in its original condition because they're spending a lot of money. There's a lot of scaffolding. That's what it would look like. But those figures up there are there. This is not my photo, and that is not my photo. That one is from an art magazine. There. So about every, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, this ends up being a national conversation about whether they should go back. But that's true for. This came up again in the US news in August when the curator, the director of the British Museum stepped down.
Yep.
And Scott Simon on Weekend Edition asked him at the very end about this, and a lot of museums in the West are having this conversation. Yeah, so.
They wouldn't exist if they hadn't been.
Right.
It wouldn't have existed
The
if they
Venetians
hadn't
were
been.
shelled as a park.
Yeah, yeah,
They
The
just,
Turks would have destroyed
Yeah.
it. All sorts of-
yeah.
so there's two sides.
There is, and if the question is about, should they go back? Not necessarily them being saved, and it's a big conversation that is not my conversation to have, but I'm just educating on that. So that's that, and then the project I was doing took place in both Athens and Marathon, which is about 90 minutes outside of Athens. And the place I was staying in Athens was perfectly situated to explore Athens and all that kind of stuff. And the road between Athens and Marathon, there's this statue of marathon runners, which we passed a couple times. And on the road between Marathon and Athens is a thin blue line just on the regular road, thin blue line that you can't see sometimes, that is painted on the road that marks the path of the current marathon so runners don't get lost. So look for that next time you're there. It was pretty cool. 2:45 a.m. flight to Cape Town. So I decided to do a day trip on a boat with to go see some islands. And it just so happened that 4 solo travelers sat in the same place on the boat at the very beginning of the trip. And we spent the morning together. The 2 in the middle are from Louisiana and Atlanta, and the one on the end is from Brisbane. And so we just hung out together and had a good time. So Cape Town. My seminary friend Ralph was waiting for me in Cape Town when I arrived at the airport. He had arrived about an hour and a half before I did. And we checked into our hotel rooms and we began wandering around Cape Town. And the walk from our hotel to the V&A waterfront was very reminiscent of Salford, where Salford and Manchester meet. It was comfortably bizarre because I lived in Manchester and I just kept saying to Ralph, this is just like Salford and Manchester, like the canal area. It was great. And we finally found our way to where the stuff was, and then this installation was there. And when I saw it, I got a bit emotional. I don't know why. It was something that just hit me. And these are the 4 Nobel Peace Laureates from South Africa who led the dismantling of apartheid. So from left to right, Albert Lutuli, Desmond Tutu, F.W. de Klerk, and Nelson Mandela. It's called Freedom Square, I believe. Ralph was in charge of planning everything but the safari and my time working on my project, and he chose well. Robben Island is where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned, and the tour there is, the buildings are all there. They're run by the state. It's a state park, and you get a guided tour of the island and the prison buildings, and then you can see Cape Town, well, this side of Cape Town from Robben Island, and you can see that big mountain in the middle. Table Mountain the city actually wraps around Table Mountain. So that's smack dab in the middle of the city. It's crazy. So Ralph, if you go to Cape Town, you need to do Table Mountain, definitely, because it's right there, and you don't have to climb it. There's a gondola that takes you straight up to the top, which is what we did. Go at lunchtime with your picnic, go in the late afternoon to watch the sunset with a glass of wine, which is what we did. There's full concessions up there. And we were actually able to do Robin Island in the morning and Table Mountain in the afternoon. I can't remember, we were trying to figure out how we were gonna get lunch, but we managed to do it all. Sunday worship was at Cape Town Cathedral, St. George's, Cape Town. And it's fairly high church with incense. I tried to discreetly take a video of the procession, only to discover that my hymnal, that my phone was discreetly backed up against, blocked the camera. And then I tried to get a video of the recessional, and I forget to press the start button. But it was a wonderful service. This statue on the right is entitled The African Madonna by Leon Underwood, carved from lignum vitae wood. I take pictures of Madonna and child, particularly ones that are not European. And I started that when I was in seminary looking for pictures online, but now that I've traveled, I've been able to take some pictures of some very unique ones. The people were super, super welcoming. I introduced myself to the dean on the way out and asked him if he could contribute to my project. He suggested we meet for coffee, which didn't happen, but that's okay. He did provide me materials for my project. And when you see the one from Cape Town, the clips of Ash Wednesday, Palm Sunday, Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, were used with permission from St. George's Cathedral. Everybody knows everybody in the Church of South Africa, Southern Africa. Then we went on our safari. And so I was at Spring Fling, which is actually called Spring Renewal, but I prefer Spring Fling, which the bishop doesn't like. And I was at the table of all clergy. And when I was telling them about my trip, one of them said to me if I was going on safari in South Africa, but I never associated South Africa with safari, so I didn't even think about it. So I quickly looked it up on TripAdvisor. There was a day trip because it had to be a day trip. That's all we had. We're like, we have Monday to do this. And I sent the link to Ralph. He said, okay. So I booked this day trip to Aquila Game Preserve, and I got to see some animals in their natural habitat. There's a lion just lying around. Aquila rescues, rehabilitates, and releases animals. So there's no hunting and there's no captivity. And also, as Ralph pointed out, who has been on safari in more Central and Eastern African countries, you actually have a better chance of seeing the animals in a game preserve rather than in the wild. So, lucky me. So my sabbatical, the part that I was doing for my sabbatical was about 75 miles from Cape Town in a seaside town called Hermanus. And the Reverend Wilma Jacobson, this is how small the world is, used to be the rector at St. Jude's Cupertino in the Bay Area. And so she sorted out the project contact. And they both work at this place called Volmed Retreat Center and Youth Leadership Program. Wilma is the chaplain, and this is their beautiful chapel. The cottage on the right is where Ralph and I stayed. It was more than just a cottage. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom layout, far better than my current house. But there was an almighty storm on the first night. So South Africa was experiencing their first, we're all familiar with this term now, their first atmospheric rivers. Climate change is real. And it knocked out the electricity for the remainder of our time there. But Edwin, the priest who was helping me with my project, his wife cooked the food for me. His part of town had electricity. So when we did our filming, I just recharged all my equipment at his house and he brought it 2 days later. And everyone's familiar with these, everyone's familiar with not having electricity because they have, South Africa has rolling blackouts every week. And so people who need them have generators. And so Ralph and I were able to go wine tasting, we were able to go have lunch, we were able to go to a sports bar and find dinner because we couldn't cook at home. We were able to do all of these things because the essential places had generators, and the generators were running their kitchens and their POS. And in the sports bar, it was also running their TVs. But nothing else, no lights. It was like this with a TV and the kitchen in the back. And that was how we had dinner that second night. And then when it came to doing my final filming, we did the filming in Wilma's dining room in her cottage, with the light from Dawn being our lighting director for the filming. So, which you'll see. Ralph really outdid himself. He found us the penguins, and he also got us to the Cape of Good Hope and Point Cape. They are not the most southern tips of the African continent. That if we had gone another 100 miles past Wilma, we would have arrived at Cape Agulhas, which is the most southern tip. So keep that in mind. Cape of Good Hope is not the most southern tip, but it is an amazing place to go. I mean, it's stunningly beautiful there. And there were penguins, not at the Cape, but close by. India. I got a great welcome because I got a sign with my name on it. I asked for the sign with my name on it, but I still got a sign with my name on it. The guy on the left is a former student at the University of Chester, and he attended chapel in the Warrington campus while he was there. And he coordinated my project work in Delhi and made sure that I wanted for nothing. It was amazing. He picked me up at the airport. He took me to his house where his wife had made a scaled down but quite substantial Christmas dinner for the three of us. And then the next day, the filming was taking place at his wife's aunt's house apartment in a posh area of Delhi. Her whole family was there and overly welcoming. And the filming was about these little Christmas cookies. And if that wasn't enough, Mrs. Russell made a full-on Christmas dinner for all of us in the middle of June. And that also got filmed. The guy on the bike was my tour guide of Old Delhi, and he was really great. I was the only one on the tour, and it was first thing in the morning, and it was raining. And after the tour, I considered myself part of the 1%. And here's why. Because I believe 99% of Americans would have abandoned that tour after 10 minutes. It was not a whitewashed or sanitized version of Old Delhi. While the guide was taking me from point of interest to point of interest, the daily life of Old Delhi was going on around us. He was kind of oblivious to it because this is his world. And just so I wasn't being overly judgmental, I went to the reviews on TripAdvisor, which confirmed that I was not the only one who believed this tour to be only for those who are not faint of heart. So I didn't take any pictures of that because I didn't think that was right. But it was pretty graphic. It was pretty graphic, but it's their life and it's what they know. And I wanted to respect that. It was a very interesting tour as well. So the reason I wanted to go to Delhi, when Derek was saying, but these cookies are from Goa, and I'm like, I'm not going to Goa. He's like, but it's only 90-minute plane. I'm doing 16 planes. I'm not doing another one. So find me a going in Delhi. I said to Derek, but because I wanted to go to Agra. India is enormous, right? It is enormous, particularly north to south. And so doing anything, going anywhere is not an easy task. He told me to cancel my tour that I had booked for the Taj Mahal, and he and his wife Akansha would take me. And they did. So they took 3 days off of work and drove me 3.5 hours to Agra. They insisted on doing this. It was part of Indian welcome. And we did a lot more than the tour agency I was going to do, what they were offering. We did the Taj Mahal, we did Agra Fort, and we did Fatehpur Sikri. And Derek even planned where we were having dinner in Agra. So, there's a little bit more. That is the prison of the husband of the person buried in the Taj Mahal. His brother imprisoned him, imprisoned, in a very nice digs. And the window you look out of, he could see the Taj Mahal and see his wife from there. So it was very, very touching.
It's an incredible story.
While we were in Agra, I got the hotel rooms and I'm cheap. And it was a challenge to know the quality of hotels. Derek kept telling me only book international chains, and I didn't. But he had a friend in Agra who approved this hotel. In its heyday, this hotel would have been, what's the film that's set in India?
Marigold Hotel.
Yes, it would have been, I mean, it had every character of that. Unfortunately, it's in decline, but it was clean, and that was the important part. However, it came with some challenging residents, and those residents were warded off with a gun. So I think it was a BB gun, but still, 7 o'clock in the morning, you're hearing shots is kind of fun. If you look at the, okay, so that monkey is where I'm standing taking that picture. And if you look at that staircase, what happened was the guy in the morning with the gun rounded them all up. There was like 15 of them at the end of that thing and shoot them over to the next building.
Oh my goodness.
It's kind of scary. So, welcome. Supposedly there's an Irish pub in every city in the world. This one is in Delhi Airport. I didn't visit, but I can tell you, I can give you another data point. I have been to the Irish pub in Istanbul that I visited in 2009, and Irish pubs always come with an Irish welcome. So next time you're in a global city, look for the Irish pub, because I've been told there's one in every city. Did not expect that in. So welcome to Bangkok. This was in my hotel room right there next to all the complimentary drinks and snacks. So welcome to Bangkok. So Bangkok was an amazing city. For being so large, 11 million people, it was remarkably easy to navigate, clean, friendly, and hospitable. This particular location is on like the 65th floor of a hotel. It's the highest open air rooftop bar and was made famous in the movie The Hangover 2. I had to go find the clip to see it. They were super welcoming to this American who just walked off the streets, clearly not obeying the dress code. And believe it or not, a glass of wine was about the same price as a glass of wine here, which is super expensive for Bangkok. But I'm from California, so I was like, oh, okay. And I was enjoying myself so much. They had live music. The singer was spectacular. The three-piece band was spectacular. It was hot, but you know, whatever. And I thought, I will stay for another drink, I think. And so I said, you know, what vodka do you have? And they told me, I'm like, okay. And I said, I'll have a martini, a vodka martini, and then I need to go to the bathroom. And so she's like, well, our cocktails start at $25. And I'm like, okay, you know, California, whatever. And I come back from the bathroom, I get my drink, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the evening and everything. I get the bill. That drink was $80.
Oh my gosh.
I went to TripAdvisor, and every other review was check the price of your cocktail if you get a cocktail. It was that was really interesting.
They started 24, but.
Yeah.
If you want vodka, it's 80.
Yeah, and I was just like, well, everything else is super. Bangkok was the cheapest city that I was in. It was ridiculously cheap, actually. The simplicity of a complex city. There was so much to do in Bangkok, and I was only there for 4 days. And I was supposed to be there for 3, but Singapore Airlines, a couple months in advance, canceled my flight and had to stay an extra day. So I just went to TripAdvisor to figure out things to do. And I took this boat trip down the canals, and you get to see how kind of some people live. Like this is their actual life on the canal. They get, you know, this was for tourists, but there are shops and stuff right on the canal and restaurants and things like that. And people get around by boat. There are boat taxis and all that kind of thing. It was pretty cool. And I got to see the reclining Buddha that everyone talks about, and then there's another Buddha coming up that came from that boat trip, but I'm gonna skip a little bit beyond that. I am going to be very bold and say that traffic in Bangkok, 11 million people, is far better than traffic in Los Angeles. It was amazing. I did take my life in my hands by getting on the back of one of those because their Uber app, their equivalent Uber app, includes motorbikes. I won't tell you the story how I first got on one, but then after that, I decided that if it's under 2 miles, it's better, it's quicker and cheaper to go on one of those than in a car because there's so much traffic. I saw one unhoused person in Bangkok, and I was just really impressed with how this giant city just works. And I met a couple people on the plane who had been to Bangkok 30, 40 years ago, and it's a very different Bangkok than it was 30 or 40 years ago. Okay, are you ready? You ready for this giant Buddha? This was on the boat tour. It was huge. I didn't do any pre-work to anywhere I went. And so when I saw that, I didn't even know it existed. And so it was really impressive. And again, like the Grand Canyon, pictures don't do it justice at all. It was enormous. Oops. I took a trip on my last day, took an excursion to the ruined temples of Ayutthaya. And it was there that I decided that I will no longer visit piles of rocks. I've done it in the UK, I've done it in Peru, I've done it in Italy, I've done it in Greece, I've done it in Thailand. No matter how significant those piles of rocks, I'm done. But this Buddha head, I wouldn't have seen this Buddha head if I wouldn't have visited these piles of rocks, got swept up into the roots of this tree, and that's pretty cool. So, and then there's a bunch of headless Buddhas. I thought I was going to see temples that were still operating, and it was 3 temples that were ruins. And so, yeah, I'm done with piles of rocks now. So there's a story here. I met these 2 girls on this tour, and TripAdvisor would not let me book the tour in English, but they would let me book the tour in Spanish. And I thought, well, my Spanish teacher will like this because I'll be spending the day speaking Spanish, probably not understanding most of it. I'll tell you, a Thai tour guide with speaking Spanish, never had that one before. So, but those 2, they said his Spanish was very good. The one on the right is from Mexico, and the one on the left is from Mexico. The one on the right goes between Arizona and Los Angeles. And they suffered through me speaking Spanish with them all day. And we hooked up later that evening because I took them to a rooftop bar, a different rooftop bar that was higher but not open air. And they thought that was really cool. And then I took them to this street side restaurant that I thought was really good. Only disappointment in Bangkok, asked for Thai hot, nothing was hot. Nothing was hot. And the Mexican girl and I were both very disappointed that nothing was hot. And we kept asking for it to be hot, and it wasn't hot. So I went to church, and this is one of 3 places where I realized what happens at the door matters. And I'm not saying that it's gonna make me review what I do when people are coming out of church. Because I was basically ghosted by the clergy on my way out
Yeah.
the door. And now I know, one of the things about going to churches in 15 different places over the summer, and I wrote this in the witness, is that as a priest, I'm learning about the lay person's experience. Whether it's from ushers or from clergy or from whatever, and that was, I think all clergy should have to experience that in some way. Because that I was like, wow, okay, I think I'll go have lunch now. And I went and had lunch, and I think the next slide, oh, no, it's not. This was an unexpected welcome. It was Pride what I thought was National Pride Month, but apparently International Pride Month, and there were buildings that were saying Happy Pride Month all over Bangkok, and I would have never thought to see that in Asia, and that's my bias. But that was really interesting. This is what I saw after I went to church. Who grew up in California? No, Bob's big boy. I think I read that the original in like Glendale or something still exists, but it's been a long time since I've been. Yeah. And I took my picture with Bob, well, with Big Boy. So he's on a building. He's on a building of a mall, and that's where I saw him. And so I went to seek him out again after church. And lo and behold, he was there. I walked all over the mall to find him, and he was there. And took lots of pictures.
Did you eat there?
No, I did not.
Oh.
Okay, so I get to Manila. I sat on the tarmac after landing for 3 hours. There was a storm that came through just as we were landing, and they grounded everyone. And they pulled the ground crew in. And so since they pulled the ground crew in, none of the planes could move. It was a really bad experience, and the people who were picking me up, I didn't know them. And it was just very complicated. And then I took these pictures to show, they're like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm here. Well, we want you to be here, but I am here. Only to find out like 45 minutes later that we had pulled into a different terminal and they didn't tell us. And so they were in one terminal where they're used to picking up people, and I was in a different terminal, and we finally found each other. It was great. It was great. And again, this Asian welcome was phenomenal. Ernie and Josie were helping me with my sabbatical project. I spent 24 hours with them. They arranged everything possible. This will be the first video, and they wanted me to see everything in those 24 hours. It was great. I'm like, maybe not the US Air Force Base, but they took me to this giant cross, which is a memorial monument to the overthrow of the Japanese in World War II. I have never, ever been in a country where they have been thankful for anything from the United States, except for the Philippines. That was a welcome surprise as well. They love the Americans. There are monuments to the Americans all over Manila, because we helped them get rid of the Japanese. Even though we occupied them, we didn't colonize them, we occupied them apparently. And so it was just a really different dynamic, historical dynamic that I've never experienced before. And he welcomed everyone. Because somebody said that on Facebook when I posted on Facebook. She's probably not alive, but because she was a stray in, the countryside restaurant, but she was really cute. Not much to be welcome to in Manila. Who's been to Manila? No one? Okay. Note to you all, Manila is not a tourist city.
Look at the evidence.
And I found this out in the airport when the Filipino priest in San Jose said, oh, no, you need to go to the beaches. There's nothing in Manila. I'm like, thanks for telling me. I went on a street food tour, which I don't regret, but there were things like chicken intestine, pig intestine, stuffed chicken stomach, all sorts of things like that. So I've tasted all of that, been there, done that. And then I did a Segway tour of the Old Manila, which is inside the city walls. I was the only one on the tour, and it lasted an hour, and we saw everything in Old Manila. And he asked me if I wanted to do 2 other things, and so the whole thing lasted an hour and 10 minutes. And it genuinely isn't like the Filipino priest said, you need to go to the beaches. And indeed, when I was on this tour, all the other 5 people were either scuba diving or going to the beaches. That should have been my clue that there's nothing to do in this town of 15 million people. I spent 12 days. I eat spicy food, rich food all the time, but it had been 12 days of India, Thailand, and the Philippines. And I saw Kenny Rogers Roasters and was like, can I just get 2 sides? And they're like, yeah. So I had macaroni and cheese and coleslaw in Manila Airport. Sometimes you just hit a wall. These are my friends in Sydney. They're the ones I was talking about who I knew from San Jose. And he's a retired priest in the Diocese of Sydney, and she's a retired school teacher. And they planned everything. They're like, you don't need to do anything. We'll plan everything. And I'm like, can I have a day in Sydney by myself? And they said yes. And they took me everywhere, including, like London, I arrived at like 6:20 a.m. And on a Sunday, they picked me up. They took me to their daughter's house in Sydney so I could take a shower. And then we went to church. The Diocese of Sydney is large, and it is very conservative evangelical. At one point, the dean of the cathedral and the bishop were brothers. I don't know if that's still the case. And so there's kind of no middle of the road parishes. So you have these conservative evangelical parishes, and you have like 3 to 5 high church Anglo-Catholic parishes. And Cliff thought I would enjoy going to the highest Anglo-Catholic parish around. And that was Christchurch St. Lawrence. It's a beautiful little church. It looks bigger than that picture. It's bigger than St. Stephen's by far, but it's not huge. And it was super high, lots of incense. The ceiling is not high enough for the incense, so I had my sweatshirt over my nose for a while because it was very very smoky. And one of the things we talk about in church is if you see somebody fumbling, because we're Anglicans, we have to hold a lot of things. We have like 6 different things that you have to hold, actually it's 3, but is to help them find what page they're on and what book they're using. And this person behind me, who was like a whole foot taller than I was looking at something. I had 2 pieces of things, and I was looking at something, and he reached over me and turned my booklet to the page that we were on. Which I was like, okay, he got the hint from his priest that he's supposed to help people who are looking. Maybe you should tap them on the shoulder first. And I actually was not, I was looking for something else, but that's okay.
That's right, you shouldn't have been.
They were lovely people though. The Blue Mountains, I think it's called the Blue Mountains, in New South Wales. Absolutely gorgeous. It's their Grand Canyon, and those are the 3 sisters. Cliff and Sue have 3 daughters, so they have named them after their 3 daughters. Again, pictures don't do it justice. It was just stunning. We drove for like 2 hours and got there, and it was just absolutely stunning. It was beautiful. Then they took me to some wineries. Against my objections, no. So we did a little bit of wine tasting. I'm gonna tell you my little wine tasting story. Okay, with 4 minutes to go. Here's my little wine tasting story. I went to 2 wineries in Australia and 6 wineries in New Zealand. And at least 4 of them, they introduced their wine tasting with our wines. We're not like, our Chardonnays are not like those big, bold, buttery California Chardonnays. Them not knowing that I'm from a Chardonnay valley. And I set them straight. Every single one of them wasn't even born when California was doing those big, huge, buttery, oaky Chardonnays, right? They weren't even born then. So I'm like, I did ask like two of them, so when's the last time you had a California Chardonnay? And they're like, so. This was the most disturbing welcome.
Wow.
Sydney Airport. First of all, I couldn't find the food. You have to walk through. I think it. So one of my criticisms of European airports is that they make you go through duty free on your way to your gate.
Yeah.
And then India was even worse. Sydney, like it was a shopping mall. And I'm like, where's my gate? And you get past all of the duty free stuff and you're greeted with that. And that is the size of a wall. That's not like a little thing. It's like two of these tables high. And it moves. It moves. If it didn't move, it'd be fine, but it's sitting there moving around. It's like, and you have to walk. Yeah, I see. Yeah, and I couldn't find the food court. Luckily, I found someplace to eat it was the most complicated airport. That's not Frankfurt. I haven't flown through Frankfurt for a while though. Oh, and I advise against Addis Ababa Airport, like absolute worst airport in the world. It's not fun. So New Zealand, 25 years overdue. Welcome. My friend, she runs a bistro. I got in an Uber. And her bistro is attached to a hotel. And so she got us rooms in that hotel. And because we were getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning and doing a train ride. And she had a glass of wine ready for me and pizza ready for me as I arrived. And we then got on the Northern Explorer and took a 6-hour train ride from Auckland to Wellington. Absolutely stunning countryside. Looks a lot like the central coast of California when we have rain. You can see in the far back, a bit behind those clouds, there's a mountain with snow on it because it was winter down there. And it was a really great time and a great time to catch up with one another during that. She went back to Auckland. I stayed in Wellington. We both stayed overnight. And then she went back to Auckland in the morning and I stayed in Wellington to fly to Christchurch in the afternoon. Went to the cathedral in Wellington. What happens at the door matters. That was the second place I was like, oh, okay. So that was very interesting. Beautiful building, modern building. But it rained the entire time. It's winter there. It rained the entire time I was in Wellington. Found a place to eat, found a place to do some receipts. And what was I doing? Filing old emails as I watched the rain. I do enjoy rain, so it wasn't that bad, but I didn't want to walk around in it. Oh, it's a video. And don't worry, I'm almost done, even though it's 6:30. Yeah. Yeah, so this video is Christchurch. This is how winter it was. I, against my better judgment, booked to go up the gondola, up the top of the hill, to have stunning views of Christchurch. This was the stunning views I got in Christchurch. The gondola is still right. Yeah. So the ticket seller said, you know, it's overcast, so you may not see anything. And I'm like, oh, hey, when am I next gonna be here? So that was it. I went all the way around the building. So that's a 360 view of the area.
Oh, look at.
Look at what I'm supposed to be saying. Yeah, I think it just kept going. Okay, this is amazing. On the left is the cathedral in Christchurch, and on the right is the cathedral in Christchurch. 2011 destroyed Auckland. It flattened
Right.
downtown Auckland. And the cathedral was unoccupiable. It took them 6 years to agree to rebuild the cathedral. And in the meantime, the government to rebuild the cathedral. And in the meantime, they made Christchurch Transitional Cathedral, which is called the Cardboard Cathedral. A lot of it is cardboard. It is not made of cardboard. I confirmed that, but you can see the pulpit's made of cardboard. The choir stalls are made of cardboard. There's a whole chapel made of cardboard. The altar's made of cardboard. And then there's these cardboard tubes on the all glass windows. That's the roof and the ceiling, because they discovered that you can't have all glass roof in southern New Zealand in the summer. So they had to cover it with something. So it was the cardboard cathedral. And ever since I heard about the cardboard cathedral, I've wanted to see it. So tick, got that. And then my friend and her boyfriend were moving into a new house. They've had rain ever since December, like literally every single day. Since December, they've had flooding, all sorts of things, and they were moving in together into a new apartment, bless you. And because they were both working, I said, I will just raid your refrigerator and rifle through boxes to make you dinner. And that's what I did. Literally boxes. They had just moved in that day, but had to work. And then I stayed an extra day to go to a new holiday called Matariki. It's the name of a star cluster in the constellation of Taurus, commonly known as, I can't pronounce that. And it marks the Maori New Year, and this is the second year that it was declared a national holiday. And Anna wanted me to stay to experience it, but she didn't know how it was going to be celebrated because it was only the second year, and so nobody knows how it's going to be celebrated. So we went to the pre-dawn ritual at 5 a.m. standing on top of this flat mountain of mud, and I only have my running shoes, which are permeable. And I'm just going to show you part of this. So that's the focal point of what's going on. There were probably about 1,000 people up there, maybe more. And it was a very open welcome by the Maori people to celebrate this festival with them, rather than keeping it to themselves. So I'm just gonna move on from there. So that was dawn that morning. We left just around that time. We were there for an hour and a half. I didn't move. Like literally didn't move my feet because I knew if I shuffled my feet, I would just sink more into the mud. And so I didn't move. And then this is the Matariki constellation. If you know anything about Southern Hemisphere constellations, because they have different constellations. I did see Orion down there. Apparently Orion is one of the few constellations that you can see on both sides of the equator. And then some similarities. I'm almost done. I have like 2 more slides. Which on the left, which one is San Luis Obispo and which one is New Zealand?
Slows the bottom left. And New Zealand top left.
So on the left,
Mhm.
out on Orchid Road, is San Luis Obispo on the top.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
We turned the corner into this tasting room outside of Christchurch, and I went, what? And everybody on the bus was like, what? I'm like, this looks exactly like home.
Yeah.
And I scrolled because I knew I'd taken pictures after all of the rain. I'm scrolling through all my pictures, and I found that. Okay, on the right, which one's California and which one is
California top,
New Zealand?
California.
If you're from San Luis Obispo County, it's very obvious which one.
Exactly.
And the lady in the back is correct. That is the cat-shaped mountain on the top at Avila Beach.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see the
So-
stairs.
And you can see
Yeah.
the stairs.
That's,
But I will tell you, the restaurants on their beaches are far better than the restaurants. So a lunch came with our tasting tour. And he just dropped us off here and he said, eat your lunch and then go wander around the beach and I'll pick you up at this time. The lunch was spectacular. Don't get that at Mr. Rick's. I stopped by Auckland Cathedral and they're not called St. Stephen's. I can't remember what it's called, but the street is St. Stephen's. And right next to the cathedral, which I believe is cathedral property, they are building high-end accommodation. Some people at St. Stephen's know what I think we should do with our parking lot. But it's on church land and a partnership with the developer. So flying to Auckland to Los Angeles, you don't fly over a single speck of land, not even an island. That was kind of the first time, and when I thought about it intellectually, I was like, what if I like that? But some great views there. And then this is really interesting. I had an exchange on Facebook about this. Whether the United States itself is welcoming is another conversation. But this is Los Angeles, and I've experienced similar in San Francisco. I can't remember Chicago's international terminal, but I got 3 welcomes on my way in. And I thought just that was great coming back. I saw it in a couple other airports. But again, whether you're welcome when you get out of the airport is a different story. So, for some people. And then the best welcome home. Oh, what did I learn? What did I learn? You have to plan. It helps to go places where you want to go, where you have a purpose. You have to know yourself. Don't do things that you don't like to do just because everyone goes to that city and does it. That's an important thing. Exercise. This was an exercise in consumerism. My bag was complete. There was no air. So I could only buy a shot glass for every 2 COVID tests that I took. Because the white COVID boxes were about the size that a shot glass could fit in. So that I took a COVID test every 5 days. Eating in restaurants for 51 days is difficult and challenging. And about welcome from the church perspective, everything they tell us as clergy and lay leaders what we should and shouldn't do when interacting with visitors is true. So there were places that were good at it. There were places that were not as good at it, and everything in between. So it was a good exercise for me to go through as a priest. And from a cultural perspective, what I learned in 8 countries on 4 continents is that the foundation of welcome is selflessness. And that was where everybody who was demonstratively welcome was not in it for themselves. They were genuinely welcoming. Welcome to my country, welcome to this restaurant, welcome to this tour, whatever it was. And that was the common element to the concept of welcome when you're traveling around the world, from my perspective. And then 2 more slides. So as I said at the beginning, this was spurred off by my assertion that the preparing and sharing of food can be a spiritual experience. And so I went to look for Christian specific foods. And I did a bunch of filming and a bunch of talking to people and a bunch of is there worship around this and all this kind of stuff. And I came out with 5 videos. 4 of them are 99% done. I have to make some changes on the same change on every single one of them. And then I have to start editing the 5th one. And when I start editing the 5th one is when I'm going to post the first one and then post one each week, hoping that I can finish the 5th one in 4 weeks. So hopefully before Thanksgiving, I can launch that. It may not be of any interest to you whatsoever, so you won't hurt my feelings if you're like, well, that was super boring. Or you're just not interested at all, so that's fine. And then the best welcome of the whole summer was Smokey when I got home and I was in my own bed with my cats. So that is everything. Clark, would you like to turn the lights back on? It's gotten considerably darker. And so I'm done. Sorry, I went a little bit longer, but does anybody have any questions? And if anybody wants to go, you won't hurt my feelings, so.
Will we be seeing videos maybe on another one of these nights?
Maybe not on another one of these nights, but they'll go onto YouTube and the link will be available, so to watch at your leisure.
Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday email. Yeah,
Or Facebook?
yeah. So,
Which country do you think, did you love the food the most?
that's really hard because I love Indian food and had some really good Indian food. I loved Thai food, but unfortunately, the first place I went to, the pad Thai was all gloopy and warm and stuff. But that one place I was with the girls, I went twice because it was so good.
I like that.
Yeah, I had, the best dish I had was the lamb chops in Christchurch, New Zealand. They were spectacular, and the second best dish I had was the springbok in Cape Town. So,
I think the food in New Zealand is surprisingly good because I expected it to be more English. And when I've been there, the food has been just fabulous.
yeah, I had some good meals there. I had some good meals everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great trip.
Greece, the last vegetable I had was in Athens. Because restaurants, I mean, even here, you have to order broccolini for $12 if you want a vegetable. And so. My friends in Australia, one night we just stayed home and ate, and they made sure there were lots of vegetables and they made sure there was lots of fruit for breakfast and stuff, because it was just like, I haven't had a vegetable for a long time. Most countries outside of Europe and North America don't do main course salads, which I have a salad like 4 or 5 times a week, so. But I didn't gain any weight. I gained weight when I came back to California.
But you were moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. Somebody pointed that out. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right.
It sounds as if welcome was from individual people who were interested in you,
Well, I think
but
there
not
were,
from institutions.
I think there were cultural welcomes as well. Institutional is different. I mean, institutional welcome,
No, but churches have to be.
churches have to, they do.
I mean, how do they do?
I think it's a part of, I think the institutions have to build a culture of welcome, because the welcome does come from the people.
Yeah.
So I think there are individuals who are welcoming. I think there are cultures that foster welcoming, particularly the poor Asian countries are very welcoming people. But I think for institutions, they also have to build a culture of welcoming. You hear this even about particular stores that are unwelcoming, you know, and they have a reputation for being unwelcoming, or restaurants that have a reputation for being unwelcoming. So I think when you're an institution or an organization, you have to develop that culture of welcome among the individuals that make up that institution. So
you learn something about that.
yeah, and one person can destroy that culture for one particular visitor. So you have to build that culture.
Or it could be a kind of bigger cultural thing, because the English are very exercised about immigration. The airports are not welcome. And I
Right,
do think they make an effort. So I've had it said welcome home.
yeah, I mean, every time I come in, they say welcome.
Yeah, but with a slightly dry kind of grin, because
When we first came to this country, we used to fly in and through Chicago a lot. And at that time, the welcome was it was unwelcoming. The agents were just downright rude and aggressive and just had an attitude about them. And we were immigrants, so we didn't have the same
Right.
experience as US nationals anyway.
Right,
I recall that there was a big questioning about that. Why is it that? And I can't remember. It was an event that affected tourism. I can't remember what it was. It might even be 9/11 when all the borders got shut.
Okay,
And then I think there was a concerted effort to change that welcome at the border, and it has markedly changed since then.
that's good to hear.
So there's a role for institutional welcome.
Yeah, and I would say Newark. Newark was interesting. This was 2015. I flew through Newark. I came into the country through Newark, and I was like, "Oh, you're just as friendly as we in the West think you are." It was like television comedy. Welcome for New Jersey, and I was just like, "What?" And then he just thought if he shouted louder at this guy who clearly didn't speak English as a first language, he would know what he was doing. And I was just like, wow. But I don't know about this. I don't know about the signage because I have noticed about 10 years ago, I noticed at San Francisco, the signage was all welcome and this whole kind of welcome home thing. And it is in stark contrast with UK border in big letters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't want people.
And I have been interrogated on many occasions at UK border. I almost got in a fight with, you can't fight with border agents, but I almost got in a fight with border agent because I'm like, you're telling me something that Home Office told me something different, and realized that it was escalating. I was like, okay, I'll just go online and look it up. Because, and he was right, but I had been told something completely different about my visa. So, which was factually untrue from the Home Office. So he was right. Any other questions? Was it what you wanted? I didn't know what people wanted. I'm like, I've got 3,500 photos. I don't know.
Very, I don't know.
So that was about 83 photographs. There are a lot more. You maybe didn't get to see what you wanted. I tried to avoid all of the big things except for things like the Taj Mahal. But because you'll all go see the big things, you've probably all traveled more than I have. So this was, as I said in several times to the parish, I think that even though it's in my contract, I think having a sabbatical is a gift. I now believe that all organizations should try to build in some sort of sabbatical or mini sabbatical at every level, because I regularly talk to people who are burned out, and burnout is real in every industry. And we're a rich enough country to be able to do that. You know, this whole 2 weeks of vacation thing, just because you're an entry-level person, just, you know, that's what leads to burnout. So I felt that it was a gift, and I didn't know when I'd ever be able to do this again. So I was like, gonna do it now. Don't know if I'll have the energy or the money or the time, or if there's another pandemic in 4 or 5 years. Have no idea. So I'm just, the conditions are right now. So I'm gonna go.